now to Barry Dunaway, who will get us started this morning.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy, and good morning to everyone. It is great to see everyone's faces on another Wednesday morning. We started these sessions about 6 weeks ago, as Jeremy indicated, just as a way to connect community leaders, to learn from each other, to continue to inspire each other, and also find ways that we can connect and continue to support each other during these unprecedented times. So thanks again for joining us. We'll share a little bit more about next week at the conclusion of our conversation today with Nicole Mullet, and look forward to the conversation. Just to remind everyone, if you want to pose any questions to Nicole, we're happy to tee those up to her. At the bottom of your screen, there's a chat box that you can just click on that and pose a question, and we'll make sure that we get that to Nicole. So Jeremy, I'll turn it back to you so that you can introduce Nicole and we can get into our conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you, Barry. And again, yes, thank you all for joining us today. We're in for a special treat with our guest speaker this morning, Nicole Mullet. Nicole serves as the Executive Director of Arts Now, an organization that helps build and strengthen a thriving Summit County arts and culture scene to add economic vitality and social vibrancy to our region. In this role, she collaborates with local leaders and organizations to advocate for the arts and culture sector, connects local talent to resources, and leads a team that promotes the diverse catalog of arts and culture offerings across multiple platforms to Summit County residents. Nicole is a graduate of Leadership Akron Class 34, Core 34, shout out, serves as Secretary of the Board of the Gay Community Endowment Fund of the Akron Community Foundation, and also serves on the board of United Disability Services. Nicole is a proud alumna of Torchbearers, where she served as a member, committee chair, and board member from 2013 to 2017, and as president in 2016. So Nicole, clearly just a wonderful person to have with us today, sharing on this topic of fostering creativity as a leader. And so we just want to invite you to start us off today by sharing a little bit about your story and your leadership journey and how you foster creativity as a leader. So we'll turn things over to you now.
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy. And it's so nice to see everyone's faces this morning. I didn't dress up for you, and now I'm regretting that when I see how attractive you all look with your with your pandemic wear. So I am Nicole Mullet. I'm pleased to know so many of you on the call today. Many of you, as I'm looking at your faces, have been awfully core to my growth in this community. And certainly as the leadership journey from Torchbearers all the way up through Leadership Akron and in this organization. And the things that I've learned along that way have been truly helpful, especially in the past few weeks as we're all dealing with our strange new reality. So I have been in Akron since, since 2006. I came to school here, left, traveled, and moved around. I'm now a recovering teacher, and came back for a job at the University of Akron. And that's when I returned. I met a number of you on this call, became involved in Torchbearers because I wanted to give back to the community, and I didn't know how to do that. And I thought that perhaps they could help me, and they did. One of the things that I learned in Torchbearers that I suppose carries into the conversation today is the ability to ideate pretty quickly. It's a fast-moving organization, and when you're a group of only volunteers managing that with a lot of creative folks, the opportunity to identify something that you would like to see happen or something to make better and actually take action on that, and sometimes fail and sometimes get it right, was pretty fantastic. So I'm very grateful for my experiences through this leadership continuum that all of you are involved in and engaged in. Jeremy gave me, of course he did, this wonderful definition of creative leadership, and I found myself reading it multiple times over the past week. And I don't know if he shared, did you share this with them, Jeremy, or I can't see your face?
No, I did not.
Okay. Well, I'm going to, and I should have just claimed it as my own. He said that creative leadership is defined as the ability to create and realize innovative solutions, especially in the face of structurally complex or changing situations. It refers to people who, when all is shifting and new approaches are yet unknown, can create clarity of purpose for their teams. And that is an awfully big definition, but it's something that I think refers to our creative community pretty aptly, and our Summit County community in general right now. We have artists and makers and machinists who retooled very rapidly so that they could start creating PPE. Isn't it our new vocabulary wonderful? All these words that 6 months ago we didn't know that are now every day. But I'm watching people retool constantly right now, and I'm watching it in our creative community. And I think that what's going to be interesting about today's conversation, and I would love to hear from some of you too, is what the face of work is going to look like in this recovery stage, how this is going to change the way that we do business. So many things that we said can't be done are being done now out of necessity. And I'm watching business, creative businesses and not. I'm watching artists try to rethink how they're making their work, how they're going to sell their work. And it's a very interesting time to be in a leadership role for an organization like Arts Now that was set up to serve as this backbone organization. I don't know if you can see that Mr. Darren Weimer's on the call, and this is work that Darren does beautifully at SEI. How can you support an entire group of people, from teachers to students to parents and families? And we think about that in the same way with the arts sector. How can we support makers and artists, arts businesses as entrepreneurs? How do we support our nonprofits of all sizes? And that conversation has changed rapidly in the past few weeks. And I think I'll pause there, Jeremy, and catch my breath and take a sip of water. Do you want to ask questions, or do you want me to keep talking? I still have your questions, so I can.
Well, we can pause there and say thank you for just that initial sharing, and kudos to other leaders who you recognize who've been a part of your journey, and just examples in the community. I'm actually going to turn things over to Barry Dunaway and Dr. John Roper, who is part of the Heart to Heart team and helps facilitate many groups, but among them our Mindful Leadership series that looks a lot at how mindfulness helps foster creativity in leaders. And so we thought it'd be great to have him ask a couple of the questions along with Barry this morning to help just fill in more of what you started to share about already. So I'm going to turn it over to John and unmute him to ask you the first question.
I'll try to find John so I can look at you. There you are.
Hello, Nicole. Thank you for being with us today. And you shared the definition of creative leadership that poses a lot of challenges just by definition. And you and I now have responded so thoughtfully in such a timely fashion to the community at this particular time. Are there certain skills for you as an individual or for your organization that allow you to kind of remain on that creative edge when in a time of crisis, so often our field of vision narrows to respond to crises? Are there things that you and your organization do? And if so, what are they?
Well, I'll start with what Arts Now did when we started to realize what was coming, and that realization hit the arts community pretty early on in this. You'll remember when gatherings were limited to no more than 100, I think, and then to 10. That's us. That's our organization. So the creative community was hit early, and will probably be hit the longest as people get through recovery to figure out when they're going to feel safe to come back. And I think one of the things that I so appreciated about the leaders that I get to serve with in Summit County is that the first priority has been and remains the safety of their audiences, their staff, their community members. So from before everyone else was thinking about face masks and cleaning supplies, our leaders who manage our venues, big and small, wanted to know how they were going to keep their audience members safe. And they were trying to figure that out really quickly. And so I think it's, looking back, it's interesting to see now that we know the timeline of how this is all rolled out. It's interesting to remember those days when we thought this might not result in a total shutdown, and we were just going to have to be really careful and be safe. And so I have to say that I think that one of the most important things about this community is our ability to shift and change, but truly with a heart for the people. So when we talk about the economic impact, and I would very much like to, it's important, it's vitally important. There's 13,000 jobs in Summit County that rely on the creative communities. But we're very aware that the reality around the health and care is the most important thing. So I think one of the things that we did, and we shifted pretty quickly for Arts Now, was to focus on advocacy, on resourcing our community with accurate information, and then making sure that we're communicating effectively with the community. So we've always been a resource organization. We've always tried to make sure our community has accurate information so that they can do their jobs well. That became vitally important and remains really important. There was a lot of fear and a lot of misinformation flying around. And luckily we have wonderful partners with the Greater Akron Chamber and the city, the county, and numerous other folks who rallied around and made sure that the arts community was getting the same information. So we were able to host conversations with SBDC. Jim Griggy hosted a couple of webinars for us. We were able to respond quickly to Facebook messages, and which I'm terrible at remembering that Facebook has a messenger system, mails and phone calls with an eye on how can we help people navigate a really complex system that's changing every day. And you'll remember in those early days, it was changing every day. One day you could apply for PPP and EIDL, and 24 hours later you couldn't. You had to pick one. And so getting information out and being super responsive was and remains important, as is advocacy. I mentioned earlier, 13,000 jobs in Summit County are tied to the creative community. That's families, that's people who haven't received a paycheck since early March. And we're so grateful that advocacy worked in this case, and that unemployment is going to be extended to those gig workers who make up about 25% of the US population. Everybody's gigging right now. That's why Mustard Seed is always so busy, right? We're all sitting there with our laptops. But how we're going to support folks started to matter a great deal. And again, just very lucky to have incredibly strong leadership, especially at some of our legacy organizations, who came together early and quickly to ideate what these solutions were going to be, to keep themselves and their staff safe, but also to keep the community healthy. I've been, and many of you on the call know this, I've been increasingly worried over the past year about some of our most vulnerable. We've been doing a lot of exploration around creative aging, what that looks like, how we can connect with our seniors who maybe don't have the ability to get out. And this situation escalated that need very rapidly. Isolation, we're all experiencing it in different ways, right? I'm sure some of you are trapped with your significant other or your families, and you would love a little isolation over the course of your day. Some of us are not. And it's truly interesting to watch that, the mental and physical impact of that. And I think it's good for us that we're experiencing it, because some people in our community experience that every day. And what I appreciate was how rapidly the arts sector and the creative community started to recognize that they were going to be vitally important in sustaining our mental health and our physical health right now through this time, and in the recovery. So if you think about what you've been doing during the pandemic, probably been binging on Netflix, right? Maybe you've picked up a craft that you haven't done in a while. There was one Christmas where my mother made us all weave baskets. I could look into that again. But what you're experiencing and how you're taking care of yourself right now are the arts. You're watching actors, you're escaping into another world. That is self-care and healing. And I think it's vitally important now, and it's going to be important in the days ahead, and how we help our most vulnerable connect to those healing processes is going to be awfully important. And I can't see if anyone's asking questions, but please feel free to ask hard questions. I told Jeremy the hard questions are fine, especially right now. You guys deserve answers to tough questions.
Nicole, this is Barry. I'm going to tee up a question that came in from Mark Auburn, and you can let us know if this is tough enough.
Okay.
But Mark posed a question around typically artists work communally, and we're seeing some artists really find creative ways to make their art accessible and public. And just wondered if you have any examples of some of the best creativity you've seen with artists finding ways to still allow people to enjoy the art they create, whether it's music or acting or other forms of art. And then to add on to that, do you see any opportunities for those artists to monetize their intellectual capacity, on how they've found these creative ways to still make their art accessible? So how's that for a challenging question?
It's an excellent question. I would expect nothing less from Mr. Auburn. Yes, we're seeing our creative community come up with very interesting ways to make art. So when you have that inside of you, you can't not do it, pandemic or not. And in true Summit County fashion, many of them are thinking about you. They're thinking about the teachers who are trying to navigate distance learning with their kids. They're thinking about parents who are teaching at the kitchen table when they were also trying to do their job. And so we've seen people kind of respond to that. So Ohio Shakespeare Festival, which would be when you go to Stan Hewitt in the summer, that is the group that you see performing Shakespeare. And they also work out of Greystone Hall. They, because so many teachers the freshman year, and as a recovering English teacher, I can attest to this. I've taught Romeo and Juliet so very many times. That is your freshman Shakespeare, right? That is what you have to do when you're a freshman in high school. And they very quickly realized that it's going to be even more challenging to teach Shakespeare from a distance, because it was never intended to be read. It was intended to be heard and experienced. So they put Romeo and Juliet online, available for teachers. They distanced themselves and they talked just like we're talking, and they had an entire section and they did Romeo and Juliet, so that English teachers anywhere could have this experience and still bring really excellent art into their homes. And it's there. You can go and watch that if you would like to get yourself very depressed on a Wednesday afternoon at teenage romance gone horribly wrong. I was reading, everybody's making lists, and as a diehard lister, there was a list that was out last week that was talking about the greatest romances of all time. And Romeo and Juliet's on that list. And I'm thinking, did they read it? Like, this is horribly sad stuff. But it's on the list. So yes, our artists are putting their work online in that forum. We have musicians. Phil Anderson did a wonderful training video for us that you can watch, how musicians can put their work online and how they can get paid for it, and how you can monetize that. But I think the reality is that some of this is still ahead of us. How do you do ticketed events online? And we're still figuring some of that out. As recently as yesterday, I was speaking with, I see Vicky's here, and I was speaking with Jocelyn from Peg's Foundation yesterday, who told me that they had found a way to teach Taekwondo online, but it was ticketed. You had to be a member in order to get in there. So now I went down a very different rabbit hole yesterday, trying to figure out how we might do that and how we could get that information to our smaller theater companies to do that. The Civic is putting out extremely high quality music and performance, and there's what they call a tip jar that you can leave money for artists. I know that we'll talk about this in a few minutes. It's one of the final questions, but that supporting our artists right now and our creatives, we're going to need them in the recovery. And in order for them to be here in recovery, we need to be here for them now so that they can survive this. The economic realities are hitting our folks pretty hard. So I think that art making is going to continue to evolve, and that it's going to look very different in the future. And I also want to, if there are any artists on here, I want to say it's okay if you're not making art right now. Sometimes we're putting all this pressure on ourselves to be the best at the pandemic, right? We want to achieve all of the things. We want to learn the new language and read the books that have been on our shelves that we haven't read. And I'm hearing from some of our artists just a deep sadness. And that's okay too. It's okay to feel that and let that kind of wash over you. You'll get back to it. You'll get back to creating when it's healthy for you to do that. So we're trying to be gentle with our community. We're seeing some folks make art like crazy and put it out there, and some feel very keenly the hurt in the community right now, and they need to rest a little bit, and that's okay too.
Thanks, Nicole. John, I'll tee it up to you to.
Okay. Well, Nicole, thank you first for that thoughtful encouragement to the creative community. I think very thoughtful words, and I'm sure they all, not being a creative person myself, but I'm sure the art community really appreciates that thoughtful encouragement. In the best of times, can you talk a little bit about how art and cultural activities and even recreation, what do they contribute to helping the city to thrive? And then two related questions. In these particular times, what does that look like in the time of the pandemic? How do those efforts, what do they look like? And then how do they help us when we begin the transition and begin to heal and return to whatever that new normal looks like?
So it was funny, this morning they released Creative Vitality Suite does assessments of communities. So it's, again, it's lists that we all love. And just this morning they shared a list of the 30 most creative cities, small cities in the country. And of course, places like Asheville, North Carolina were on there, and San Jose. But it's interesting because I think people are more and more coming around to realize that healthy communities and healthy cities need the creative community. I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but it's what a sad life it would be if all we could do was go to work, go to the gym, and go home. We need to engage and connect with other people. And I think that's going to be increasingly important as we come out of this, because we're all going to have to process what's happening right now. and the impact on our lives and our families' lives. And I think processing that, really grief for like a loss of time and a loss of connectivity, is where the arts and culture sector, it shines. It's how we develop empathy. It's how we see the world through other people's eyes. And I think it's going to be increasingly important. The reality is, beyond the touchy-feely stuff that we're all going to need in the days ahead, and that very real comfort, the arts make communities healthy. There's reasons why people are collecting lists of creative cities that are booming. Places where you have artists making work, where you don't just have big box stores, but you have creative nooks and spaces where art is being made, where designers are putting out excellent quality work, makes places, it's where you want to live, it's where you want to be. And Summit County is very blessed in many ways in this space. We have a cultural community that's excellent. We have excellent art being made here. And that matters. We have natural resources that connect us from a downtown into the national park. We're amazingly lucky in the assets that we have in this community. And I think that sometimes where we do ourselves a disservice is we don't identify them as assets, or if we do, we don't value them in the same way that they need to be, and in the way that allows them to grow. We have to care for the things we put our time and our energy around things that matter to us, and we have to take care of those things. And I'm so grateful. I think Lisa's on here somewhere, Lisa King, but I can't, oh, there she is. We took care of something that we value yesterday, right? We took care of our park system. We need to take care of our assets so that they can continue to be here. And sometimes the arts part of that gets left off a little bit. But our artists are making our communities places where we want to live, where they want to raise a family. And they're working here. They're entrepreneurs. This isn't for some folks, it's a hobby, but for many, it's not. This is how they make their livelihood. This is how they make work so they can live here and take care of their family. And I think the more that we can do to take care of our assets, they will be here for us when we need them. And we will be needing them in the days ahead.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to tee up the last couple of questions to you. And I'm going to start with one from the audience, from Abigail, where she's asked the question, we're all very focused today just on the daily activities of how do we navigate today based on the changes that are in front of us. How have you been able to step back from the daily environment to thinking big picture strategically? And Abigail was just complimenting, you've been really innovative and thoughtful in thinking about the big picture. So how are you addressing that personally? And then if you could just wrap that up with, how can we help you? How can we help the arts community? How can we rally to continue to support our creative community, because they are such a valuable part of who we are as Akron?
Oh, I just figured out where the chat was just now. It's Abby Posky. Thank you, Abby. Abby is, if you don't know Abby, she's running the Downtown Cuyahoga Falls Partnership organization, and talk about somebody who started a new job and very quickly has been doing a really wonderful job for those businesses. That is certainly Abby. So how we were able to respond quickly is that we're small and nimble, and we had to. We're a pretty lean organization. It's myself and Grace Myers, who may be on the call. I can't see everybody's faces. And the reality is that I care very deeply about this community. I care very deeply about the people that I'm serving. And I think that when you do, it necessitates action. You can't You can't watch someone struggling with trying to navigate the unemployment system and not help. You can't watch a small business just need someone to talk to because they've shuttered and they had to, and they understand that, but they also don't know how they're gonna reopen, if they can reopen. And some of them won't. I think that reality is hitting hard. And I've been told, we'll make this Nicole's true confessions here for the last few minutes. I was told recently that you can't save them all. And I know that on some level, but I can't work like that. I can't work like I can't save them all. I'm gonna try really damn hard. And I think when you care very much, and I see people on this call who care very much about our community, we're all doing the same thing, whether you're sewing masks or you're being there for someone who's isolated and needs to connect with another human. We're all doing it. We're just doing it in our spaces. And this is my space. These are my people. And I care about them very much. And so does Grace. And so I think that's why it matters so much. The other side of that, and Abby, I think Abby and I share this tendency. It's very easy right now, I think, for all of us to let work, you get up, you go to work, and then at some point you realize you haven't eaten or showered, maybe in days, we don't know. And then you kind of go to bed and start the process over again. So I think that I have been trying to be really intentional in making sure that I'm reading, that I'm watching Call the Midwife, which is fabulous if you haven't seen it. And there's so many seasons, so we can get you through the entire pandemic. But making sure that we're doing those things and engaging in that creativity that's going to help us move forward. And Barry, I think the last question you asked was, how can the folks on this call help?
Yeah, that's right.
Which is a lovely and wonderful question to ask anybody, I think. There's a image that I think Jeremy has that talks about different ways that you can support the arts community right now. And it is important. And I'm, again, knowing that human life, knowing that our frontline folks are going through enormously challenging, there it is. Morgan Lasher made that. I can not claim that level of talent at all. Knowing that our art, I think extending each other grace, knowing that human life is the most important, but we have artists who haven't gotten a paycheck since their gigs were canceled in March. And they weren't ready for that, and unemployment wasn't ready for that. So while they're eligible right now, the system is not set up for them just yet to be able to do that. So they're getting in line, they're filling out the applications, and they'll be ready when that new system is online. But there's a lot of fear, I think, right now around how they're going to be able to take care of themselves. So I think one is just recognizing that and recognizing that the economic impact of the pandemic does extend to the arts. There's an index out right now that identifies the most vulnerable sectors. So the sectors that were most impacted, so manufacturing and construction and transportation, and arts and culture it's the highest ranked. It has a score of 60% vulnerability, but it's been, but so far it's been the last sector to receive resources and support in the smallest amounts. And so I think acknowledging that reality is going to be helpful, because folks haven't been able to get what they need. So extend them a little grace if as we come out of this, if you see them in the grocery store and they're really grumpy and stressed, there's probably a reason for it. So extend them a little bit of grace, but ways that you can help right now beyond extending grace. If you do have season tickets or tickets to an event that was canceled, you can, and you have the financial ability to, because we're all dealing with economic realities here. Consider turning that into a donation instead of asking for a refund. If you are able to buy work online, most of our musicians, and I saw Sylvia, I think, mentioned Zach, who's been doing some wonderful stuff online, participate, and then also download and buy some local music. It will help you and it will help them. And if you see someone doing one of those Facebook Live or Instagram Live or social media live that I always feel like they can see me when I'm watching them for some reason, consider tuning in. Art requires an audience, and they don't have that right now, and they need you. They need you to be able to make their work and to feel connected to the community. So when you're scrolling through and you see someone performing, consider unclicking the mute button and joining and watching and giving them some of those little hearts that float up over the screen. And whenever possible, continue to support local and buy local work.
That's great. Thanks, Nicole. You care deeply, and that is evident, and we are just so fortunate that you're leading Arts Now. So thanks for being with us today and sharing your thoughts on being a creative leader. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was nice to see so many of your faces. I keep seeing more and more pop up.
That's great. We know many of you will just have to drop off in just a minute. We wanted to let you know that as Jeremy and I have thought about this series, next week is going to be our last Leadership Connection Forum. As we think about what's next, we thought, just based on the timing and as organizations and companies start to think about reopening in the new reality, we thought next week would be an appropriate time to wrap this session up, or this series up. So we're going to ask 4 or 5 of our community leaders to join us and ask them to share with us, how are they reimagining the future, personally, for their organization, and for Akron. So we hope you'll join us next week for that conversation as we all think about the future. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jeremy. We can spend a few minutes together in small groups, but again, thanks, Nicole and John, for helping us with the conversation. So back to you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Barry. And as we transition, again, thank you. And just want to also mention, before everybody drops off, I know Leadership Akron has their final registration for their signature program, and I believe other programs as well. So just want to give a shout out to that, as my fellow Core 34 member, Nicole, shared today from the signature program. So, please look into that. We're going to give the opportunity for some breakout sessions